Good afternoon from Jakarta, and hello to everyone joining from other parts of the world. We hope you're having a good day. Welcome to this year's first Global Town Hall series on statesmanship in a turbulent world, remembering Pope Francis and the quest for justice, peace, and humanity. My name is Dianova, and I will be the master of ceremony for today's discussion. In addition to the annual flagship event, the Global Town Hall now has a smaller scale discussions intended to create a platform for conversation among the civil societies. The theme of the discussions will range from geopolitics, climate, food security, technology, and many more. So please look forward to the upcoming Global Town Hall series. Today, I am pleased to welcome attendees from more than 20 countries, to name some but not all: Australia, Timor-Leste, Belgium, Uganda, Botswana, Cyprus, Bangladesh, Ecuador, Papua New Guinea, Angola, China, Italy, the Philippines, and many more, making this an actual Global Town Hall. Today's discussion will explore the role and contributions of the late Pope Francis on the global stage, examining his legacy from various perspectives. We have the pleasure of welcoming His Excellency President José Ramos Horta, President of the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste. Welcome, Mr. President.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Next one, we have Dr. Jose Angel Gurria, the President of Paris Peace Forum. Next, we have Steve Howard, Secretary General of the Global Foundation. Hi, Steve. Next one, we have Ibu Yeni Wahid, Director of the Wahid Institute. Hi, Ibu. Next one, we have Dr. Natalie Tocci, Director of the Institute of International Affairs in Rome.
Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, we have Dr. Samir Budinar, Director of Al-Hokama Center for Peace Research. Welcome, everyone. Now, without further ado, allow me to hand over the discussion to our moderator, Dr. Dino Patijalal, Founder and Chairman of Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia. Pak Dino, you may have the screen.
Thank you, Dianova, and hello to all our Global Town Hall participants from around the world. My name is Dino Patijalal, Chairman of Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia, the largest grassroots foreign policy group in Indo-Pacific. And this is a really special moment for us. On 21st of April, at the age of 88 years old, Pope Francis passed away peacefully in Vatican City. And this was a shock to the international community. Pope Francis was known as a reformist leader. He inspired millions of people around the globe with his sincerity, idealism, and wisdom. He was a love leader of 1.4 billion Catholics in this world. And not only that, he, among the lineup of world leaders, he was very unique, and he was a moral authority and never shy to speak truth to power. So he will definitely be missed in the international by the international community. And today we are delighted to have a session where we will examine the role of Pope Francis in foreign policy terms, in terms of his role and contribution and legacy in the international stage. And we are delighted that we have all these great panelists from around the world, and we look forward to a good discussion. And we also congratulate the Pope Leo XIV, as now he leads the 1.5 billion Catholics around the world, and also follow the footsteps of Pope Francis in pursuing peace and justice in our world today. So as a keynote speech, I'm delighted that we have President Jose Ramos Horta, President of the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste, who will give his keynote remarks on the role and legacy of Pope Francis in world affairs. We are grateful for your presence here despite your busy schedule. And Mr. President, the microphone is yours.
Dino, always a pleasure, privilege to join you, your great initiative, Foreign Policy Committee of Indonesia, and all the prominent personalities participating in this session, in all your previous sessions. I do not claim to be an expert on Papa Francisco. I do not claim to be a friend of his or too close to him. I met His Holiness 3 times, the longest, well, twice in Rome, in his office, when I made a state visit to the Vatican City, to the Holy See in January 2024. From instead of the customary 15 minutes, 20 minutes for a head of state meeting with the Pope, I had actually more than 40 minutes, and we discussed a wide range of issues. I raised with him the situation in Myanmar. I briefed him thoroughly for several minutes, and we did exchange views on Gaza. I would not have failed. I would not fail. I would not forgive myself if I had forgotten the Palestinians and the suffering of the Palestinians. But also, obviously, we talk about the United Nations. I raised the issue of how time and again we, the international community, fail to prevent conflicts. I told His Holiness, we all talk about prevention of conflicts, but we fail all the time. We fail to prevent the coup in Myanmar and the spiraling of the violence there. We fail to anticipate, or we did anticipate, many of us anticipated the problems in Ukraine. You just need to know what happened immediately after the fall of Berlin Wall and the agreement with Reagan, Kohl, Gorbachev, and how NATO expanded eastward toward the Russian border. So you could anticipate. And yet, nothing was done to prevent the conflict from happening. It's all over. So we talk about that. And we had actually 40 minutes. And soon after, 2 days after my briefing to the Pope, I read the first comprehensive statement by His Holiness Papa Francis on the situation in Myanmar. And after that, he talked again several times about Myanmar. And then next was his visit to Timor-Leste. That's when I accompanied him for several hours over 2 days of his state visit, arriving here on the 9th of September 24, and he left on the 12th. We had, out of population of 1.4 million, we had 700,000 people in the streets, in the mass, everywhere for several days. And the Pope was overwhelmed with emotion from his visit here. We are 99.6% Catholic and devout Catholic, not just a statistic Catholic. So we, the people here, myself, we revere Papa Francisco, and tremendous shock. I was away. I was in Bulgaria, in a work visit to Bulgaria, when in the car I got the news from Rome of Papa Francisco passing away. So I was not here in the country, but at least 200,000 to 400,000 attended the Mass in Dili in honor, in remembering of Papa Francisco. Well, I have to say, in summary, I do not recall of a Pope in modern church history with his influence, with his intellect, with his profound commitment to justice, to human dignity, human freedom, his profound commitment to peace, and not only commitment to peace, but how he speaks out on peace and on wars that are waged by countries with impacting on the poor, on the children, on civilian population. And Papa Francisco filled a gap, a deficit in the world, a world without really great leadership. I do not wish to minimize the role of the UN Secretary General, because again, we have been fortunate over decades of having great Secretary Generals. We go back to Kofi Annan, great leader of the UN, then followed by Ban Ki-moon from South Korea, a great Secretary General, and then by Antonio Guterres from Portugal. All three were exceptional leaders. But the UN is the UN. The UN Secretary General doesn't command the largest economy of the world. The Secretary General doesn't command the 6th or 7th fleet. So his influence goes as far as the gates of Washington, Moscow, Beijing, etc. So, more often than not, when the Security Council, they are bogged down in their rivalries, in their differences, no Secretary General, they would listen to any Secretary General. So the fault, the failure is with the P5. Of course, I would have to be careful not to assign equal responsibilities for failures to all 5 member Security Council. Some more responsible than the others in terms of their influence, in terms of their relationship with countries where this conflict takes place, like for instance Gaza, responsibility of Israel, and the others that have a strategic relationship with Israel. And the same with Ukraine, who is more directly responsible for the conflict in Israel. We cannot blame the UN, cannot blame the Secretary General of the UN. But who are the people, the leaders who should have prevented the conflict in Ukraine? I say this because all these conflicts impact on all of us in the world, in particular the more vulnerable countries, the countries in the periphery of the world, the developing countries in Africa, Latin America, in Asia. We are the ones who pay. We also pay the price, apart from the Ukrainians and the Russian population that pay the price for the war in Ukraine, and the terrible price the Palestinians are paying for the conflict over Palestine, over the two-state solution, over the refusal of Israel to honor the two-state solution. Well, with the rest of us, we suffer also because of these conflicts. As we suffer from COVID, impact all of us in the periphery, as we suffer from the tariff war between the US and other countries. So in the midst of this, that the role of Papa Francisco was, at least he made us feel that we were not abandoned, that we are not orphans, unwanted orphans. I'm just very, very pleased with the College of Cardinals in Rome. It shows again the wisdom of the people, institutions that have 2,000 years of experience. The way they pick Papa Leon XIV, I was amazed with the wisdom of the decision. Papa Leon seemed to be very similar to Papa Francisco. I never met Papa Leon XIV. I was not so fortunate, but he grew up, spent many years grew up in Chicago, in the US, from different backgrounds. He had French, Italian, I think, and then background, and then spent 20 years in the slums of Peru. So he very much like Papa Francisco, he understands the suffering of the people living in the slums of the world. So we were not left orphans with the passing away of Papa Francisco, but Papa Francisco's legacy stays on, remind us of human dignity. Because I told Papa Francisco in Rome, I say, Your Holiness, I'm so disillusioned. I'm ready to surrender, to give up with the current world situation. He looked at me a bit taken aback and he said, pero vamos continuar a luchar for peace, but we have to continue to fight for peace. And I'm happy that the College of Cardinals elected this great Pope with very similar to Papa Francisco, I think, from what I've been reading. So Dino and all the prominent personalities on this panel, I think I should stop here. I apologize. I have an event at 3:30 that I have to attend to. Otherwise, I would be very happy to listen to each and every one of you. It is not out of disrespect that I have to leave by 3:30 my time.
Thank you, Mr. President. Because you have to leave early, let me ask you this question. You are and the late Pope Francis, our fellow leaders of a country, and I know you have spoken to hundreds of world leaders in your lifetime. As you sat across the late Pope Francis and had a conversation with him, what was it that was different about his aura, about how he treated you, about how he saw world events compared to others?
The Pope, Papa Francisco, and the Holy See. I always say when I compare countries' foreign services, diplomacy, I know around the world, different diplomacies, different foreign ministries. The Vatican, the Holy See diplomacy is one of the best in the world. So they have extraordinary wisdom and experience in dealing with very complex, delicate situations, stemming from 2,000 years of experience, of wisdom. And the first, Papa Francisco, I think more than any previous pope, he reached out to all civilizations, to all religions, faiths, cultures. For instance, it was, I think, under Papa Francisco, I don't want to make a mistake, that for the first time after hundreds of years of division, he reached out and met with the Pope, the leader of the Orthodox Christian Church in Moscow. I think there was a meeting in Havana hosted by the Cubans as the Pope was going to Mexico. So that was a first. Also in 2019, Papa Francisco was for the first time in the Arabian Peninsula, in UAE, United Arab Emirates, in Abu Dhabi, where he participated in World Religions for Peace. And there, together with the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Cairo, both signed this historic document called Declaration on Human Fraternity. I have to say, this declaration, this draft, was worked behind the scenes very discreetly for 1 year at least by a good friend of mine, Judge Mohammed Abdel Salam, Egyptian, but he is also the Secretary General for the Human Fraternity Secretariat. He is the Chairman, Secretary General for Council of Muslim Elders, Muslim Elders Council. He drafted this. He went between them, Papa Francisco and Grand Imam, for 1 year in absolute secrecy, traveling all the time from Abu Dhabi, from Cairo to Rome, back and forth, until they had this human declaration ready. And I have to say, I'm very proud of the fact that my country, as soon as I was re-elected president, even before taking over formally, the swearing in, I got our national parliament to adopt a resolution adopting this declaration as our national document, translated into our national school curriculum. Papa Francisco and the Grand Imam were very happy that predominantly Catholic Timor-Leste was the first country in the world to adopt the Human Fraternity Declaration as a national document. So this is how Papa Francisco worked. He reached out to everybody. He developed this exceptional relationship with the Grand Imam, Professor Tayeb of Cairo. But also he reached out to Hindus, to Protestants, to all other faiths. And he also showed respect to the atheists, to agnostics. And so partly, growing up as a child in Argentina during the dictatorship and being a Jesuit, the Jesuits have these profound intellects, profound intellectuals. So he has all of these advantages that made him very unique in the history of the popes.
Okay. Thank you very much, President Horta. And do stay as long as you can, but it's always great to see you. Now I would like to turn to Angel Gurria, President of Paris Peace Forum, actually, my other boss. I'm also a member of the board of the Paris Peace Forum. Dr. Angel, please share your thoughts on the impact and legacy of Pope Francis in world affairs.
Thank you very much. Let me first recommend that you all read the discourse, the speech that the Pope Francis gave to the ambassadors on January the 9th, 2025, only a few weeks ago. And it's called, for want of a better word, it has a long title, but it's about the diplomacy of hope and why hope remains eternal and why hope should drive our actions. So let me recommend that to you. The Diplomacy of Hope, a speech to all the diplomatic corps of the Vatican. Now, this is a man that had the highest moral authority, and he used it very well, very practically, very positively. He used dialogue as the main thrust of his work. He was never afraid to speak truth to power. And he dealt with very important issues, even conflicts within the church, like the question of pederasts in the church, etc. And he always was very straightforward, but always with love and always with a simplicity, a humility. He was a very good listener, as President Horta just mentioned, and he made the church a listening church, which is very important because the church normally wants to dictate. Now, he was as green as they come. He was a climate change. He was convinced about climate change, but he even wrote an encyclica, Laudato Si, and he made the question of climate change, yes, a question of science, but also he made it a question of moral and spiritual, an issue of moral and spiritual importance. And again, Laudato Si is a whole elaboration of why it is important to keep the climate change. And let me just say, many countries in the world seem to have forgotten the issue. Let me now move to some of his practical achievements. For example, people don't know that he was quite instrumental in the rapprochement between Obama and Raul Castro, and in the visit that Obama made to Cuba. Actually, it was the Vatican all the time that was with quiet diplomacy and secret meetings and very discreet meetings, etc. He also had a quite controversial but highly strategic issue with China, and he agreed with China on how to appoint bishops in China. And of course, many people are criticizing him because he gave the Chinese too much power, maybe, but at the same time, he had the practicality, he had the pragmatism that he knew that he had to deal with the Chinese. As President Ramos Horta mentioned, he engaged with other religions and movements, the Jews and the Muslims and the Orthodox, and the document about human fraternity that President Ramos Horta mentioned, signed by Ahmed Tayeb, the Imam. I have to say was something that everybody picked up, and everybody, as he said, we made it a national document. Now, he was also for migrants, and he actually visited Lampedusa, which is the island to which migrants arrive from Africa. in Italy, and he also visited Lesbos 3 years 3 years later. Lesbos being Greek, and it's just and again the object of the site of migrations, because he was always interested in the fate of migrants. Now, I think he denounced war. He said, war is always a failure. War is always a failure. And he helped with peace in Colombia, with the FARC. He denounced the arms trade. He always had Syria in his mind. Syria was uppermost in his mind, and I think he was very happy to see Assad go. And now, with Syria getting the sanctions lifted, he talked about Ukraine, he talked about Gaza, he talked about South Sudan, and worked on these issues now with different degrees of success.
Yeah, Angel.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm sorry for interrupting you. Apparently, Natalie Tocci has to depart her plane. So I was wondering if you can continue where you left off, and then you can return to your point after I let Natalie to say her words before she gets on the plane. Is that okay?
Please.
Yes. Okay, Natalie, please. Yes.
Thank you so much, Dina, for this, and apologies. So I'll be extremely brief indeed, because otherwise I'll miss my plane. But I simply wanted to point out and start with the obvious, and the obvious being that Pope Francis was the Pope from the Global South. You really need to go back to the 8th century, Gregory III, who was Syrian born, to get to a Pope that was not European. So I really think that is the sort of fundamental context that really frames our discussion. And I think this had a number of implications. Of course, none of, it's not necessarily that all were necessarily positive, looking at it from a European vantage point. It was clear that from the perspective of a European, his positioning on Ukraine was problematic. And I think it's important to say this really quite clearly. The way in which Pope Francis read the war as one being caused by NATO expansionism, and I don't need to go through the entire narrative, was obviously viewed as problematic from a European that looks at this as an imperial war. And in many respects, the way in which, on the one hand, in a sense, Donald Trump has proved that narrative wrong, precisely because, of course, had it been a war about NATO and NATO expansionism, it would have been over in 24 hours. And partly also because now with Pope Leo, in many respects, that narrative is being rectified. That was the piece of Pope Francis that was viewed as being, as I said, from a European vantage point, more problematic. Looking at the positive side of the ledger, of course, that's much, much longer. And many of the things Jose Angel Gurria was mentioning, as well as President Horta before, very clearly the way in which Pope Francis did act as a Pope of the Global South by reaching out to the Muslim world, by reaching out to the Russian Orthodox Church, by putting climate at the forefront of global threats. That was migration. The list is really extremely long. And of course, the Palestinian question, the way in which Pope Francis, even literally on his deathbed, was calling the parish of Gaza every single night, was really absolutely extraordinary. So all this to say that, one doesn't necessarily have to look at this as a record of, in a sense, 100% kind of, positive, but really the positive that he brought and the moral voice to the Global South that he brought, I think, is really a legacy which I hope and I'm absolutely sure that Pope Leo is going to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie Tocci from Institute of International Affairs in Rome, and safe flight. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.
Sorry, Dr. Angel, did you want to finish the remaining of your remarks here?
Right.
Yes.
So simply to say that, and you mentioned this, he appointed Leo the 14th. He appointed him as a cardinal, and he appointed him to the dicastery of the bishops. So, in a way,
sorry, we can't hear you.
Unmute.
Okay. Yes.
See, he looked like he had it all planned, even his succession. Although we know that it's not the case, that it's more complex than that. But he obviously sought somebody that we didn't know then. Actually, an American pope was not in the cards in theory, but the Chiclayo part, the Peruvian part, and I have to say, being a Mexican, that the fact that we had an Argentinian pope, and then we have somebody who is also Peruvian nationality. So I think they will have a sensitivity for Latin American issues. Now, he delivered where moral authority and symbolic leadership mattered most. And he was consistent all the time. Sometimes very successful, sometimes less successful, but consistent. And as I said before, his simplicity, his humility created a church that was also a listening church. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Angel. Thank you very much, and I hope you can stay to answer questions from the audience of Global Town Hall.
I can say.
Thank you. Now I turn to Steve Howard, who is the president of Global Foundation. He's Australian, and he has met Pope Francis before, and actually he took me to Rome in one of the Global Foundation discussions where I had that pleasure, and I certainly share the impression of Angel that this was a leader of a large portion of the global population who had no ego, really. When we met him, he was so humble. He was so down to earth, and yet he was so embracing and welcoming. And it's quite unusual because most world leaders have huge ego, including the one that is ruling the United States now. Yeah, he was the total opposite. Yeah. So, Steve, please share me your thoughts on the Pope Francis and moral affairs. Please unmute. Sorry, please unmute. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yes, you're on now.
Thank you. Dino, thank you very much for your warm introduction. It's an honour to be with you today. And it's a special honour because this town hall event is being organised by your organisation, the Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia. And this is rather wonderful. It's a testament to Pope Francis and his significance for those outside the so-called Catholic world, but also it's a testament to your own efforts in bringing interfaith together. I think this is one of the defining things about Pope Francis in my experience of dealing with him and having our people from the Global Foundation associate with him over the time as Pope. He cared very much about the whole world from the global south, but he cared about the people of the peripheries, as President Ramos Horta said. His visit to Timor-Leste, Indonesia last year, which you'll talk about later, was a very significant thing for him when he didn't visit some very big countries, including his own home country, Argentina. We are not a faith organisation, we're a civil society body, mainly supported by business and community. But when Pope Francis was elected as Pope, we thought this looks like an exceptional human being to help lead an unled world. This turned out to be true. And so we set about trying to make a relationship with him. Firstly, he was very keen to clean up the Vatican finances, which were a mess. And we were able to introduce Christine Lagarde, who's a dear friend. She was running the International Monetary Fund. She and Pope Francis met each other, and together they set out on a path to improve the transparency of how the Vatican itself would operate. What Pope Francis said very early on, he said, we can't have this globalization of indifference. His phrase when he saw the suffering, the drowning of migrants in the Mediterranean, the globalization of indifference. This is a phrase that stuck with me since that time. He also said it was this era we're living in, the era that's unled, was more like the end of an epoch and not just the end of an era. So this restlessly clever man saw the world from the outside in, at the same time from the ground up, from the peripheries, as he coined it. So he motivated us in the Global Foundation as a civil society body with private sector base and wide community outreach to add faith-enabled to our reach and impact. Not just Catholic faith, because we're not a Catholic organisation, but multiple faiths. Now, this was unfashionable about a decade ago. And now, as you saw, if you watched any of the funeral of Pope Francis, this is no longer unfashionable. It's now respected universally that faiths play an important part and belief systems play an important part in informing how people choose to make decisions, whether they're leaders of countries, leaders of organisations, or regular citizens. So we were able, with his encouragement, to meet in Rome on many occasions. Over the past 11 or 12 years, we had delegations from political leaders, central bank governors, heads of global institutions, leaders of faiths, academia, community, civil society. But the hardest part of our work was to bring leaders of business, who are those who sustain our work, because Pope Francis was sceptical about the role of business in society, given his experience of crony capitalism in Argentina. Over time, there was a changed view, which is now more widely understood, that if we're going to create a more sustainable future for the planet, we need business, enlightened business, to play a powerful role. And so, going from the globalization of indifference, we created the phrase, which he embraced. He helped shape it for us. We called it cooperative globalization, with 4 principles: that it must be fair, inclusive, transformative, and prosperous. So this is an amazing thing that a religious leader, as you say, with a low ego, a beautiful sense of outreach, traveled to the corners of the world, was able to inspire many people across many communities, many who had no formal faith affiliation, or if they did, it was brought further to light by virtue of his influence. So we came to appreciate Laudato Si, mentioned earlier, this whole idea about care for our common home, for the environment, our planet. There's no jobs, no life on a dead planet. So it's become a fundamental item for the Global Foundation to mobilize all those different parts of society worldwide to say we have to act on climate change and we have to preserve nature. So later this year in August, we'll go to the Amazon in Brazil and meet there to discuss how we take these issues forward. Dino, you mentioned that you were a member of one of our delegations that went to Rome, to the Vatican, to meet with Pope Francis. And I remember my job was to introduce each member of the delegation to His Holiness. How warm was his connection to you, particularly when you gave him a blessing, an Islamic blessing? This eye contact, this reaction, this intimacy was very special. And I congratulate you for your bravery, your courage in reaching out on interfaith matters. We last saw Pope Francis in June 2024 in a wheelchair. He met us on the steps of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. We gave him a small silver flower, which is the emblem of Brazil's mining company, that's Vale, which is hosting our meeting in the Amazon this August. We miss him. We miss the way he leaves us with such warmth as human beings about our connectedness, about the fact that the world, as much as it might be fragmented and broken, must be joined up. So we're looking forward to working with his legacy, with you in Indonesia, with your global affiliates in Brazil, in Australia, in the peripheries, the Pacific, Timor-Leste, the global South. And we look forward to learning of your progress in this journey together. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Steve. And actually, before I turn to Yeni Wahid, I have a personal anecdote about Pope Francis. You know, he was in Indonesia to do a state visit, and he was on his way from his hotel to the airport. It was really unannounced, and my office is just at that road where he would be passing. So I was just happened to be standing on top of a bridge, and then I saw his motorcade heading towards my way on the way to the airport. And first, he was riding in a very beat up small, I think Toyota or something. You know, it's not a Rolls Royce, it's not limousine, right? And he had his window down. But what was more incredible were the thousands of people on the street that went out of the office expecting to see a glimpse of him. And it was unannounced, you know, they didn't say that he would be passing at 11:30. They just waited and waited for him to come pass through. And what was even more incredible was majority of these people were Muslims. And how I know, many of them were wearing hijabs, right? And they were, you know, screaming at him as if they were seeing a rock star. You know, they wanted to touch him and so on and so on. So this impromptu and genuine expression of love from average Indonesians, including or especially Indonesian Muslims, towards the late Pope Francis, I think was something very special, and I saw for myself. Right? So with that, I now turn to Yeni Wahid, director of Wahid Institute. Yeni Wahid is the daughter of former late President Abdurrahman Wahid, who was also the head of Nahdlatul Ulama, the largest Islamic organization, not just in Indonesia, but also in the world. I forget the count of how many members. Was it 90 million or 100 million? But Yeni can sort it out. Yeah, Yeni, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dino. And good afternoon to all of you. Of course, to Dino, happy Huria, and also Dr. Howard, and all the distinguished participants of this event. Thank you very much for being here. Great participating in this, honoring and also remembering Pope Francis, whom I had the privilege. And for those of us who have that great honor, privilege, we can some very warm and compassionate, you know, it's just very engaging, and equally respectful. You know, whether you are a head of state, you are a common, you know, he will treat you equally respectful. He will treat. I think he was the you know, he's kind of, the first time that I back with President Trump and in the first term, and in the newspaper that was very silent. Really spoke us way, but so I think that showed if a person could tell it was very for example, I mean, we spoke about the immigration issue for that he actually restricted policies. He wrote letters to the U.S. bishops expressing solidarity with them who actually fought advocating for migrants in the U.S. and urging the bishops to continue defending the rights of the marginalized. And so this is what sorry, do you know, I got a message in my system that says that my camera needs to be turned off and then turn on. Do I need to do that again? Or it's okay
No,
now?
you're fine. I can see you now.
Oh, okay,
I can see you
okay.
now. Okay, good.
I think they turn off the camera just then. Okay.
Okay.
So I think also, you know, from the point of view of someone who comes from a different religious background, Pope Francis actually shared quite similar what do you call it, values that we at the NU actually shares also believe in. For example, you know, the value of tasamu or tolerance, the tawazun or balance, his stance on moderations, i'tidal, that's what we call it. And then also, of course, the main thing is the principle of justice. And so we see this over and over again on all of these overall policies. We see that the Vatican's foreign policy under Pope Francis very much is very distinctive in its emphasis on moral authority, moral diplomacy, and soft power, rather than just, you know, traditional geopolitical interest. We see that the policies tries to focus on promoting peace, promoting human dignity in the faith dialogue narrative, worldwide. We talked about his signing the Declaration of Human Fraternity with the Sheikh of Al-Azhar, Grand Sheikh At-Tayeb, for example. And that really marked a really important juncture in the interfaith community timeline, because for the first time we got two great leaders who actually come together and sign up a very important document that could become a legal, in a way, legal and moral, what do you call it, a moral base for further engagement with the others, quote unquote. You know, Muslims and other faiths probably struggled in the past and how to treat others in a dignified and meaningful way. But this document actually provided a base for us to confidently engaging with others in a very respectful way. So this is some of the things that I really appreciate about Pope Francis. Also, something that we haven't mentioned before is even though there is room for improvement, but Pope Francis actually tried to empower women more and promoting gender equality. He has called for greater female representation in decision-making roles. And I think this is for someone in his position, it's not easy, but he tried to push forward with that agenda. His advocacy for Ukraine and Gaza, of course, this is something that is really known for the world. His constant calling and like a daily checkup on the all of his congregations in Gaza, for example, just shows how he puts emphasis so much on the issue of humanity. And Pope Francis puts so much. His influence goes beyond just the Catholic community. Like Dino mentioned before, thousands of people line up the streets in Jakarta and just wanting to just get a glimpse of this holy man. And it's just amazing that someone that actually comes from one particular religious background could touch the hearts of so many. And I think this is a legacy that he left behind that was based on his continuous work on humanity. And I think I will just close with that. I think it's past my 5 minutes mark. So
okay, I want to ask you a quick question though. Yenny, your father was a religious leader, right? As I said, the largest leader of the largest Muslim organization, but he was also a political leader. And he was also a world leader, leader of the 4th largest country in the world. And sometimes they all don't go together, right? You gotta have the right balance and so on. And sometimes you gotta be more political leader than religious leader. How did your father play that role with so many hats? Because this is, and how do you reflect that in Pope Francis? Because as Angel said, he did the Cuba U.S. rapprochement, right? Which hat was that, right? And so on,
Yeah.
Right.
So we need to remember that the people, constituents, the political masses actually moved based on some particular issues and identities. Identities really shape how people react to certain issues. Identities are the filters in which people processes many things, including policies. And religious identity really is the basis of so many ways people make a decision about their lives, about whether they get married, whether they get divorced, whether they will have children or not. Even as basic as that, how they would deal with inheritance, for example. So many things in our lives are influenced by religious issues. That religious issues really shape the way we behave. And as 80% of more, people in the world are, belong to faith groups, this is a big force. So this force can be used for good or for worse, for bad things, right? Some religious leader decide or chose to divide. And using religion as a political tool to garner up support, to show up support for their political ambitions. But great religious leaders actually falling for the true teachings of religion, which most are emphasizing on peace, on tolerance, of treating others with dignity, with kindness. Great religious leaders actually asking people to give sacrifices, for the greater goods of others. And we also need to remember that religious people, usually they start with good intentions. They want to save people. They want to, get people to be in heaven, to go to the right path. Unfortunately, many of us believe that the right path is our path. So, of course, this creates conflicts. And so a great political and religious leaders know how to set boundaries, how to push forward, push their constituents or their congregations, their ummah, to do good. Even though sometimes it means that sacrificing themselves by allowing others to also share the space, with others, and not having our religion as a dominant force, or dominant values in where we live. So I think this is where my father advocated for that. Pope Francis used his power very, very wisely. He pushed for
Thank you.
in the world. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a question for Angel, and then a different question to Steve. A question to Angel. Look, there is a geopolitical fault line. One of the geopolitical fault lines in the world was the one between the West and Iran. Yeah, in some Western countries, Iran is demonized. Yeah, the bad guys, right, and so on. But the president of Iran visited the Pope in Vatican. And had a very interesting visit, President Hassan Rouhani, right? I'm just wondering, from your viewpoint, what is the significance of these constant efforts by the Pope just to make this outreach across geopolitical fault lines, right? And the question to Steve. Look, Steve. I'm just a bit worried now that Abrahamic tensions are rapidly rising due to events in Gaza. The Israel-Palestine conflict. Anti-Semitism is going to the roof in many parts of the world, in Europe and United States, and Islamophobia also going to the roof dramatically. This is based on a lot of surveys. I'm just wondering how important are the efforts undertaken by the late Pope Francis, for example, in the document on human fraternity that he produced with Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, and would it be able to make a dent on this alarming rise of Abrahamic tension, especially the rise of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism around the world after the ongoing war in Gaza, and also the attack on Israel on October 7th. So I'll go to Angel first here. And Yanni, if you want to comment on that later question, you're most welcome as well. Angel, yeah.
I think that he had the feeling that you should not let Iran drift away from the brotherhood of mankind, if you will, that he would not demonize Iran, and he would try to keep Iran within the fold. A very good example was given when the president of Iran visited the Vatican. And of course, it was perceived that there were leaders that were getting together, not only on a Catholic leader and somebody who was, I would say, completely opposed, if you will. But I think he set the stage for the fact that we never demonized Iran, because we always kept the idea that if they were in good stead with the Vatican, well, there was probably something to rescue there. And today, as you know, President Trump is speaking about having an agreement with Iran. So Pope Francis seems to have created a school of thought about the fact that we should keep Iran within the Brotherhood of Men.
Okay, but just a follow-up question on that, Angel. Henry Kissinger said that we have to navigate between values and interests, and set a realistic pathway forward, right? But navigating between values and interests, every world leader has have their own recipe for that. But the Pope, being the leader of the Catholic Church, he must have a special, what do you call it, special approach in addressing this task. Any comment? Because for me, what is interesting, he was never intimidated by anyone, and he was never impressed by power, no matter how powerful the country who pressures him, or by wealth. Yeah, he was he was very authentic and genuine, and had a clear moral compass. So I don't know if you have any comment on that, and then I'll go to Steve after.
Yes, I would say that we have to always navigate between values and interests, as Henry Kissinger mentioned. However, I would say that the moral authority of Pope Francis came from the fact that he mostly was talking about values rather than interests. But you could say that his interest was the principles that hold up the church, etc. But he was always preaching and speaking about values, and he always held the values up when in any circumstances. So I would say that Kissinger was more on the part of interests, which I can understand very well, but Pope Francis was mostly on the side of values, and I think that is the lesson that we should learn.
Thank you. Steve, question on Abrahamic tensions and Pope Francis' role in mitigating it.
Look, I think Francis did what he could. His moral authority was great. His advocacy was great, both private and public. But there are limitations to what you can do with moral authority and values alone. In a way, nation states are the problem, both how they conduct their affairs internationally and internally. When I mentioned earlier that Pope Francis said we're living through more like the end of an epoch than an era, I think what he was suggesting was that we don't have in place arrangements by which peace can be managed properly across the world. And it's not enough to have only nation states at the table together, which is why the United Nations is struggling. It's no fault of the organisation. It's a problem of what we've constructed. We need a governance arrangement for a new and different era. I mean, what's going on in Gaza and the Middle East and in other parts it's beyond horrible. And, it's an affront to our humanity that this continues. And so it must change. But there are limits to what even a brilliant pope, even a pope like Pope Francis and other faith leaders can do. It has to be governed by other solutions through politics, through international organisations. But sadly, the United Nations is paralysed. I think the great powers need to take a look at themselves, because they are, the P5 are the ones who have the say. We can argue about the Security Council and should people have less or more voices in that forum. But those who are there when they go to bed every night, they should live with their conscience and be honest to it, because this is unacceptable. This race to the bottom and the dehumanizing of people is unacceptable. But Francis did what he could. He called the people of Gaza. He did amazing things with the Accords going back over time, as have previous popes at the Vatican. This is beyond religion and values. And it's interesting, I loved hearing what Jenny had to say before, because her father, a wonderful man, was in this same vein, who said, no one's religion, no one's ideology is more important than someone else. We're all brothers. It's fraternal. And I don't know, I think citizens have to be angry, anxious but angry about this, and push for just solutions, because it's unacceptable. And you know what? It's a slippery slope. If this continues, where does it take us? Do we go into a pit where we lose all traces of our humanity? So I wish Pope Francis was still alive. I wish Pope Leo could continue this work. And I'm sure, I mean, remember, many of the colleagues at the Vatican who worked under Francis are still there. I know some of them will. They are wonderful people. But there are limits to what faith advocacy and based on values can achieve. And sadly, all too much is determined by what constitutes interests.
Okay, thank you. Jenny, can you comment on the, we heard earlier about Pope Francis' attention to the suffering in Gaza. Yeah. And of course, Israel-Palestine conflict is not a religious conflict, it's a political territorial conflict, but it does have ramifications on the perceptions of Muslims towards Israel and vice versa. Yeah, I'm just wondering, what is the significance of the Pope's moral position on Gaza towards, as seen by Muslims, including in Indonesia?
Yeah, well, for so long, Gaza had been forgotten. Not just Gaza, I think the Palestinian people in general. You know, their plight was not heard, and there had been, in a way, efforts to not highlight their plights in the world. You know, so for someone like Pope Francis to actually put an interest in this and advocating clearly for ceasefire and calling for the stop of the war, calling for justice, it's a significant thing because it influences 1.6 billion of people, Catholics in the world. And that really changed has ramifications in terms of global political stage, you know, the dynamics in the global political stage. And countries then are forced to listen to that. And countries that were not traditionally sympathetic towards the Palestinian issues, then starting to listen to that. I mean, I don't know whether there has to be a more, I think, research on this, but countries like Ireland, country like Spain, now started recognizing the Palestinian state as the ultimate way of solving the conflicts by recognizing a two-state solution, as I think also your position, Dino, when you were the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs. So for someone like him to use his position to call for ceasefire when it was rather controversial, when Israel was very quick to condemn those that call for a ceasefire as being anti-Semitic. I think that was a very significant position for Francis. And for us in Indonesia, the fact that many Indonesian people mistakenly see what's happening in Gaza as religious issues, as a religious conflict, which is, like Dino said, is not true. And this is a self-fulfilling prophecy that was, written by, what was his name? The Class of Civilizations, Samuel Huntington. But for someone like Pope Francis to actually come out with his position, then really shows to the Muslims worldwide that we don't have to engage in this is not a religious conflict. And we can engage on a basis of humanity rather than using a narrative of religion that is very emotional. and has has implications that goes just beyond this conflict. If you feel this is just a religious issues, then you tend to treat others in your localities with suspicious eyes. But if you can work together, the Muslims in Indonesia, the Christians, the Catholics in particular, can work together on these issues hand in hand to try to promote peace and ceasefire, then it will become a much bigger force. So I think that's the implication for us here in Indonesia, Dino.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Abdul Wahab in Bangladesh. Which initiatives undertaken by Pope Francis are considered the most impactful or transformative, and why? We also have another question from Cindy in Jakarta, who is actually a FPCI member, and she asks, do you think that one of the critical source of Pope Francis' credibility is his authenticity, and how has he been able to maintain that authenticity and make it as an asset in his diplomacy? I'm sorry, I can't say authenticity. I hope that's right way of saying it. Maybe Angel first.
Someone is going to make a meme out of you.
I know, I think so. Angel? Can you unmute? Yes. No, can you unmute again? Okay. No. One more time. Still unmute. Still one more time.
Unmute.
Yes. Okay, you
Okay.
good.
Very good. So authenticity, it's about being authentic, and he was authentic. He was 100%, and what you heard, what you had is it was him. I met him a couple of times, and I have to say that people were even people in the around him were very used to him just putting it out there, and with great authenticity. Now, let me mention about the questions about his diplomacy and his diplomatic skills. Maybe the more important job that he did was the one that was concealed, the one that was very, very quiet, like with Syria, with Ukraine, with Gaza, with South Sudan, for example, because he called war is always a failure. I repeat, but he never left these issues. And again, if you read the speech that he gave to the diplomatic corps on the 9th of January this year, that only a few weeks ago, you will find that there are a number of efforts that are made in all of these areas. And because things like peace in Colombia, the question of migration and the visit to Lampedusa and to Lesbos, etc., those are very public. in events. But the fact that in order to do those trips, he had to work and work and work and work and prepare. People don't know about that. And I think that is where he spent most of the time, in preparation and working and working and working with his great moral authority. But as I said, sometimes you succeeded and sometimes you didn't. And sometimes, well, circumstances were too complex in order to have the Vatican make a difference. But he always tried.
Thank you. Steve, did you want to take that other question about what is the most transformative policies? And next to Yenny, question from Antonio, the Philippines. The Pope Francis was never afraid to speak out against war, injustice, and even internal church issues. In your viewpoint, why is it that so many world leaders today are afraid to take a moral stand, and what they can learn from Pope Francis? Steve Howard, question on transformative, transformative policy of
Thanks,
Pope Francis.
I think there are a number of areas, but the one that I'd like to highlight is his encyclical or statement, his major statement, Laudato Si, in 2015, which translated from the Latin means praise to you, Lord. It was his call to all of us about the cry of the earth, the cry of the poor, the cry of the environment, and a need to make a much more concerted effort. Now, this was coincided with the Paris Agreement on climate change, and therefore it gave impetus to this in the non-faith world, the faith world and the more general world being impacted together. It certainly inspired the work of many governments, organisations such as ours, and it continues because, as we all know, climate and the destruction of nature is continuing and is very real and very threatening to not just livelihoods, but to the future of humanity. So this was a cry from the heart, but it was argued, as was said earlier, he argued with science, with facts, and also with passion and compassion. And I think it's very important that we continue 10 years on to take heed of this message from Pope Francis, Laudato Si. We must care for our common home. It's all that we have, and we won't have it unless we change course and do it together.
Thank you. Yenny?
Yeah. So why are leaders afraid to take the moral stance? Well, because I think he meant the political leaders, right?
Yes.
Head of state. Yeah. The reason for that is because interest groups and lobby groups are very militant and very powerful. So that's the reason why. And leaders are afraid to lose their power. They're afraid. The interest groups, the lobby groups, they can mobilize opinions. They organize, town hall meetings. They influence medias, and leaders are afraid to lose their positions because of that. So they don't dare to take the moral stance, take the moral position, because they're afraid to lose their position. And that's a short answer to that. So unless the general public can organize ourselves in a significant way, in an efficient way, and pushing and pressuring our leaders to take the moral stance, usually the lobby group wins, the interest groups wins.
Yes, thank you for that very important message. We actually have a message from Foreign Minister of Egypt, former Foreign Minister of Egypt, Nabil Fahmy. Let's hear that message, that important message.
I want to start by thanking FPCI for inviting me to this global town hall to celebrate and remember a statesman in a very turbulent world, remembering the eminence, the late Pope Francis, and his continuous quest for justice, peace, and humanity. His eminence will be sorely missed, especially in these troubled times where the world is in disorder, lacking coherent structure, and witnessing rampant disrespect for international law, as well as egregious disregard for basic human rights and excessive violence. In these troubled times, the world has lost a true and compassionate believer, highly attuned to the suffering of the less fortunate, and resolute in his support for peace amongst peoples, whether members of his congregation or of diverse beliefs around the world. I had the honor and the pleasure to visit with His Eminence Pope Francis in the Vatican a little more than a decade ago. Since then, I remained ever touched by his grace, his humility, as well as his sincere interest in our well-being in the troubled Middle East. He was resolute in support for peace between peoples and has spoken out repeatedly in defense of Palestinian rights, calling for an end to inhumane practices and compassion for human lives. Equally significant has been his commitment to dialogue and engagement with constituencies of different faiths. He issued a joint and historic declaration with His Eminence Grand Imam Ahmad al-Tayyib, Sheikh al-Azhar, where both leaders of their faiths were resolute and unwavering in calling for compassion and cooperation amongst God's children. It is with my highest respect and appreciation that I address you today to register my admiration for a singular human being that by example challenged us to be better believers with the highest respect for human rights and singular sense of humanity. Please accept my sincere words of condolences with the hope that Pope Francis' attributes, expressions, and practices will have an everlasting contribution towards building a better world for us without prejudice or preference, one where compassion is widespread and held high. May peace be among you. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Foreign Minister Nabil Fahmy, former Foreign Minister of Egypt. I would like to give the floor to Dr. Herman, the head of School of Religion and Philosophy of Minhaj University in Lahore. He's also part of the Abrahamic Peace Working Group. Dr. Herman, you can have your 2 minutes, yes.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I was very impressed by the speakers, and I've just come from Pakistan, where I work permanently, but I'm on my way back to Australia. And you know the tensions that have been present in Pakistan vis-a-vis the conflict with India. And that whole problem has raised for me the issue of nationalism and the separate nationalism in the world, the nationalistic feeling that is so evident in the world. And so a great world leader like Pope Francis was able to transcend that nationalistic feeling and bring people together. But of course, the reality is still there, and I've just been part of that reality by being in Pakistan, and the Indian reality between these two countries is very tense, and it's probably just an image of what's going on in Gaza and in so many other places. The whole issue in the Ukraine is also a question of nationalism and who is going to win and who is going to be more powerful and so forth. So that's my comment. I'm just very grateful to this opportunity for this forum. I think we need more forums like this where we can exchange views. I'm more interested perhaps in a specific issue of how Pope Francis addressed the issue of refugees in the world. He certainly spoke out many times and said we should remember, we should receive, we should be hospitable. And of course, I agree completely with that. But I also have a question, if I'm honest, I'd have a question about how to be hospitable, because there are so many voices which are negative and who raise the issues of how to deal with the influx of many, many refugees. So there are practical problems about receiving refugees, like in Australia, it's almost closed itself towards refugees and so forth. Whereas in Europe, it's not possible to do so. So there are very many practical issues. So I'd just be interested in views on how to deal with how to be hospitable to refugees in the world today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Herman. We actually have come to the end of our session. I want to raise one question to all three panelists, and you may also reflect on Dr. Herman's question. But my question is that we're now living in a world that feels like it's going in the wrong direction. Rivalries are rising. The world is much more fragmented than before. Mistrust is high. A lot of countries are turning inward. There's identity issues are rising, and Dr. Herman just spoke about the migration issue and so on. So, in view of what late Pope Francis had done throughout his life and as Pope, what should be the role of Pope Leo XIV in dealing with such a world condition? Yeah. How should he position Vatican and the large Catholic population of the world in setting the world back in the right direction? So I would like to invite each of the panelists to say some words on this. Yeah, starting with Angel Gurria, and then Steve, and then Jenny, and then we close. Please.
I think that the question of advising a pope is always difficult, is always complicated. But I would say that, first of all, Leo the 14th has a legacy on which he can build. That is all that Francis did in his papacy. I think he can continue. But there are certain things that even somebody like Francis did not move forward enough. And maybe you have things like Syria is happening. Again, maybe the insistence on Syria now that Assad is gone, maybe is a good place, and now that sanctions are being lifted, etc. But the Ukraine issue, the Gaza issue, the South Sudan issue, the many issues, the Haitian issue, the many issues in because it's not only South Sudan, but it's Ethiopia, it's Cameroon, it's Mozambique right now, it's Mali and Niger, etc. So there are a number of places in Africa, and I think that Leo the 14th can actually pick up where Francis left and continue the work, continue to work not only in that direction, but in his direction. That means he will give the work of the Pope's, his own direction, his own meaning, and his own emphasis.
Thank you, Angel. Steve? Same question.
It's a very tough act to follow, someone like Pope Francis, but Pope Leo is also a global pope from the global south, more Peruvian than Chicago in many ways, with a very interesting background. And so I hope that the fact that he was elected by his fellow cardinals says something about the church coming to terms with the fact that its future is not in Rome or in Europe, it's actually in the global south. So if Pope Leo is true to himself and true to Pope Francis, he'll continue to prosecute that. The one thing, he mentioned this in his speech at his inauguration mass yesterday in Rome, is looking for unity within the church. We haven't touched on this today, but Pope Francis had many detractors, not so many from outside the Catholic Church, but many from inside. And if the Catholic Church could become a much better listening organisation in the spirit of Francis and under the leadership of Pope Leo, listening and acting with values and Catholic social teaching, it will have much greater impact. I think Pope Leo might be quieter in his style, more collegiate. Pope Francis was a little bit of a lone wolf sometimes, and maybe that's not a bad thing. But bringing the Vatican along, this is a very old institution. And while it does amazing work from time to time, there are still challenges within. So I hope that this Pope is his own person, but also carries the spirit of Francis, which I think he will. I think Francis had a significant hand in his elevation to the role. But events, dear boy, events are what shapes people in leadership position. And we don't know what lies ahead, but we wish him well, and we hope that the spirit of Francis sits at his shoulder.
Thank you, Steve, for those wise words. Yenny, the woman always have the last word, so it's Yenny.
The wise words as well. Yeah, I mean, I think Pope Francis' positions on the issues of immigration, actually refugees in particular, really it's really symbolic of how he treats others, how he treats everyone. Every individual is important. I mean, if we put ourselves in the refugee position, in the refugee shoes, no one wants to be a refugee. And I think this is what is captured by Pope Francis. I mean, when he encouraged for more compassion, for more global shared responsibility, I mean, no one would choose to become a refugee. Refugees, people are driven away from their homes because of armed conflicts, because of the war, because of maybe environmental issues, because of political persecutions, etc. But it's not by choice. But every individual matters. And so how are we going to deal with these individuals who are in misfortunes? Are we going to just ignore them? No, of course we cannot. What if we are one of them? What if the same thing happens to us? We don't want to be ignored by the world, so the world needs to come up with a better way to deal with these issues, especially as you said before, Dino, is that the world is now is more chaotic. The potential conflicts is much bigger. So the potential influx of refugees are bigger in the future. How are we dealing with this? How is the UN, the UNHCR dealing with all of this? What kind of resources that we need to allocate to deal with these issues? So I think this Dr. Hammond mentioned about the host country. I presume that his interest is in how we deal with the influx of refugees coming to our countries. What is the host country's position on that? Refugees will always, in most cases, will create tensions, cultural tensions, fight for resources, etc. So, but the overall policies, in my opinion, should be based on inclusion rather than isolation. So how to integrate these people in their host countries, how to give them a better chance in life. And so that starts with compassion. That starts with treating individual as important, every individual as an important human being. And that is shown by, that was shown by with Pope Francis policies, all his lives.
Thank you, Yanni. And to be honest, one of the things I really appreciated about the late Pope Francis was that he always spoke with a very clear moral authority. The moral clarity in his positions, in his messaging is just unmistakable. And we're living in a world whereby the line separating what is right and what is wrong is becoming more and more blurry, right? And that's just very alarming to me. And also, the sense of humanity, the sense of our common humanity. If you look at the violence, conflicts, around the world, that it's facing erosion. So and that's why it was inspiring to see Pope Francis taking the positions that he did in light of all these world situations. And with all that, I'd like to
can I just say something? Just one line, right?
Please.
What Pope Francis said, that true power lies in service. And I think this is something that most leaders forget. And, you gain power by giving yourself for others, by giving service to others. And this is how your legacy will be remembered. How many world leaders will be remembered after they pass? How many Zoom meetings like this, how many talks will be done for world leaders in the future? Not many, but Pope Francis, really, his power still remains with us because he gave his life in the service for others.
Yes. Thank you, Yanni. And with those words, I would like to thank all the panelists. Angel Guria, he's 1:30 in the morning in Mexico City.
Wow.
That's incredible. All right, and you still look so fresh. I don't know how you do it. And Steve is having a better time in Australia. It's still daylight there. And also Yanni, thank you so much for taking part in this discussion. And I look forward to all the participants who are joining and asking questions in the next Global Town Hall meeting. Thank you.
Let me just say, Dino, that your letter and your comments to all the participants was as good a homage that as you can lend to Pope Francis. It was great. It was just fantastic. And let me congratulate you.
Thank you very much, Pa Angel. Yes. Now I'll go back to the MC, Dianova.
Thank you, Fadino, for moderating the discussion, and also to Mr. President Jose Ramos Horta, Dr. Jose Angel Guria, Steve, Ibu Yeni, Dr. Natalie, and of course His Excellency Nabil Fahmi for sharing your incredible insights. Before we wrap up the event, I would like to invite everyone in the Zoom, the speakers, moderator, and some of the circle members for a short photo session. So everyone, please can turn on your cameras and have your brightest smile ready. All good? Okay, on my count. Okay, in 3, 2, 1. Okay, once again. In 3, 2, 1. Thank you, everyone. Thank you once again. It has been a very fruitful discussion, and I'm sure everyone, both in the Zoom and in the YouTube, found the session very interesting and highly informative. For your information, today's event will also be available for rewatch on FPCI's YouTube channel at Secretariat FPCI. Also, you will see a link in the chat box for everyone to fill in and claim their e-certificates. You can also access the link by scanning the barcode shared now on the screen. Please make sure to fill in the details correctly, as the e-certificates will be sent to your email. Once again, thank you very much for your participation in today's discussion. For more information, please stay tuned at FPCI social media. See you at the next FPCI event.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah.
Thank you, Dino.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night. Good night. Have a good sleep, Pa Angel. Yeah. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Yanni.